You mentioned the theme of tonight, Chris.
I'm into themes.
The official theme, as you say, is Make America Safe Once Again. But judging by the speakers list, tonight could just have easily been called the Night of 1,000 Humiliations. Primetime speakers, as you may know, include two of Trump's fiercest Republican primary opponents, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. Now, while losing candidates often speak at the victor's convention, Trump's humiliation of these particular rivals reached a different order of magnitude during the Republican primary.
The problem with Ron DeSanctimonious is that he needs a personality transplant.
He's not a talented politician, obviously.
Ron DeSanctimonious was walking off the stage, and his feet, it's weird, because his cowboy boots. So they have a high heel outside, but inside you got a big deal going on. And he's walking like...
After mocking Governor DeSantis for allegedly wearing lifts in his cowboy boots, DeSantis eventually dropped out, and Trump focused his attentions on Nikki Haley, who in the closing hours of her candidacy called Trump not qualified to be president. Trump, in return, zeroed in on Haley's race, suggesting her parents' status as immigrants from India might somehow disqualify her from the presidency. Trump misstated Haley's given name, Nimrata, repeatedly calling her Nimbra and Nimrata. And he explained to Fox News that those mistakes were definitely intentional.
She says that you're using a nickname based on her given name, Nimrata. You called her Nimbra in a post the other day. Why do you do that?
Well, I do that with a lot of people. With her, it's just something that came. It's a little bit of a takeoff on her name, her name, wherever she may come from.
Wherever she may come from. In addition to the thinly veiled xenophobia, Trump also engaged in explicit misogyny, calling South Carolina's first female governor essentially a bimbo.
But if you think that Nikki becomes president, she's not tough enough, she's not smart enough, and she wasn't respected enough, she cannot do this job.
Despite the never-before-heard humiliations and apparently significant reservations last week, Nikki Haley released the 97 delegates she won during this year's Republican primary so that they, in turn, could vote for Donald Trump yesterday. And tonight, both Haley and DeSantis are choosing to publicly pledge loyalty to Donald Trump, despite the fact that Donald Trump does not plan to meet with either of them this evening, even after they address his convention. I mean, not even bothering to meet with them is really just the last humiliation, maybe? I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I find fascinating about this, and we've seen it time after time after time, J.D. Vance, of course, being one of the most extreme examples, this sort of trajectory of supplication, of submissiveness, right, of these sort of politics of domination where you make fun of someone, you cow them, you bully them, and then they sort of end up, kneeling before you.
Yeah.
And this happens time and time and time again. And it's a huge part of the sort of Trump mystique and shtick within the base, that he's the powerful one. He's the sort of dominant one. What I find remarkable is there's these two twin impulses in any human psychology like these folks, which is ambition and ego and self-regard. Mm-hmm. And it's wild to watch. Like, I just feel
they're very divorced from one another in this.
That's my point. Yes. They're in total war with each other.
In a weird way.
What I find remarkable is to watch. I just feel like, just speaking for myself, like, I don't have it in me to humiliate myself that way because my ego's too big and I have too much vanity. What I find amazing is that they don't. Everyone, and you, I will say, Alex Wagner, sitting at this desk, or actually another desk, you were like, Haley's going to fall in line on those primary nights.
I have to say, I was the naysayer. I didn't believe it. I don't understand what the point of her candidacy was. I know someone who does understand.
Fearless forecaster. Yes, someone who does. Joining us now live from the arena there in Milwaukee, McKay Coppins, staff writer for The Atlantic. McKay, let me ask you this first, because Alex made this point. So this is always the case at conventions, that there are unity events, and particularly after contested primaries, they feature the other contestants, right? So that is part of what a convention is for, right? That we're all rallying behind the nominee. And look, we have all these people. In 2016, Ted Cruz famously did not do that. I was actually inside watching him give that speech when he said, vote your conscience. It does feel like there is a added dimension, though, here and now in Milwaukee and in the modern Republican Party that's above and beyond just the normal falling in line.
I think you're right. As you two were talking, I was thinking about how in some ways this feels like the same story we've been doing for 8 years, right? This story of dominance and submission, of humiliation, of abject loyalty tests. We've been talking about this since 2016. But I was thinking back to that convention in 2016. I was there too. And there were still back then signs of kind of the fractiousness within the party. There were, Ted Cruz famously did not endorse Trump during his speech. You had Mike Lee, along with the Utah delegation, on the floor screaming their protests to Trump's, formal nomination. There were signs that there was still some resistance to Trump. And at the time, I will admit to this, as a reporter who had covered the Republican Party pretty extensively, I was sort of naively surprised for the same reasons that you just laid out, that people like Paul Ryan, like Marco Rubio, had been so willing to fall in line. 8 years later, I'm not surprised. And I will say I've been at this convention for a couple days, and there is no sign of resistance. There is no sign of fractiousness within the party. Everybody is completely in lockstep with Donald Trump. And the handful of Republicans out there who are not just didn't show up in Milwaukee. That's the difference, right? Like if you are not fully on board, you just don't come, and you're really not participating in the national party anymore.
I want to bring in Tim Miller, who once served as the spokesman for the RNC. He's now, of course, a writer at large for The Bulwark and one of our most trusted soothsayers, seers on all things Republican. Tim, McKay makes a point about what the humiliation process is different and more extraordinary this go round when it comes to people like Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, but whither the Nikki Haley voter, right? Like, they're up until the end of this primary period, there were still people that weren't voting for Donald Trump in those Republican primaries. Do they too capitulate? I mean, do you have a sense that resistance even exists anymore?
Yeah, Chris is nodding yes. I think they're divided. The Nikki Haley voter was basically three different types of people. Something I kept trying to say during the primary. People were like, she's getting 21%. That means 21% of Republicans are for her. I was like, It was about 8% probably of Republicans that might go back to Trump. And then 8% of my people, former Republicans that are still registered vestigially from the past that voted for Joe Biden already in 2020. And then 5% of political obsessive Democrats and independents who crossed over because they hate Donald Trump so much. Freaks. Right, super freaks, sickos, real sickos.
We say this lovingly.
We call them engaged citizens.
Yeah, I literally saw one in one of our focus groups. She was like, David Plouffe on MSNBC told me to cross over, and so I'm going to do it, right? So
Wait a second.
So there's some, and that 8% could very much matter. Right, and I think Nikki Haley speaking to that group tonight is going to offer them a pitch. This is where it ties into the J.D. Vance thing. The J.D. Vance pick was not a move for the Nikki Haley voter. It was a move for the other side of the horseshoe. Running up numbers even more about working class white men, running up numbers even more with younger based voters. And based, not base. Voters. The Vance pick makes the Haley speech tonight absurd. Actually, it'll be interesting to watch.
That's a good point.
Because she's like, "Oh, I'm doing this because Donald Trump will still make people safe," but it's both of them now want to give Ukraine to Putin.
Yes.
Although one of the things I'll say, and McKay, I'm curious if we've been listening to some of the speeches, which again, let's just be clear, your median convention speech is just not great oratory and, eminently forgettable. That's true of all parties and all the conventions I've been to. But McKay, when am I looking here? Or am I looking? Thank you. McKay, the question I have for you is, so one thing that conventions can do very effectively, and I think you saw this in 2020 with the Trump convention when he swore in the new immigrants in the White House, is to play against type, right? You're trying to get people to vote for you. You've got this big platform to people to vote for you that aren't already there. You can play against type. So George W. Bush, all the compassionate conservative stuff. Donald Trump did a little of that in 2020. I remember watching John Kerry in 2004 basically was going to crawl through the mud to kill Osama bin Laden himself, right? That was the stake there. Is there any of that happening atmospherically, thematically from what you're seeing there about sort of playing against type to folks that maybe are turned off by the harder edges of MAGAism?
I would say, to Tim's point, if anything, they're going the other direction, right? I have not seen a lot of appeals to Mitt Romney Republicans, Nikki Haley Republicans, Reaganism. Like that is so fully in the rearview mirror. Now, I guess the caveat is that there are a lot of kind of speeches that are not broadcast in prime time that are just kind of very standard anodyne Republican talking points that like you've heard 1,000 times.
Yeah.
But for the most part, the big moments are not appealing to that that left behind faction of the Republican Party. They've got the Teamsters on stage, and they're trying to appeal more to the kind of disenfranchised or frustrated parts of the Democratic coalition.
Yeah.
I can say, after having spent some time in the last couple of days texting with some of those old guard Republicans, they have not seen a single thing in this convention so far that makes them excited about Donald Trump. If anything, they feel more alienated.
Looking at live images right now of the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Tonight is night 2. After J.D. Vance was announced as Trump's running mate on night 1, this was the follow-up headline at Politico.com. Trump's VP pick spells disaster for Europe and Ukraine. With the U.S., for the moment, standing as the most important ally in the world for a country that is fighting for its very existence. After having been invaded by Russia, Trump has already effectively pledged that the U.S. will switch sides in this war if he is elected. He has gone so far as to say that he will tell Russia that they can do, quote, whatever the hell they want to any of our NATO allies once he's president. But even so, of all the choices that Trump could have made for his running mate, Senator J.D. Vance is the single most radical choice he could have made on this issue. Senator Vance has said bluntly that he is opposed to virtually any proposal for the U.S. to continue funding this war. Vance said even more bluntly, quote, I don't really care what happens to Ukraine one way or the other, which understandably has Ukraine and the rest of Europe and everyone who cares about the biggest European war since the Nazi era, since World War II, has everyone a little freaked out about the prospect of a Vice President J.D. Vance. I mean, Moscow's delighted, but the rest of the world, not so much. On the issue of abortion, a key, if not the key electoral issue motivating voters this fall, J.D. Vance opposes abortion in any instance, even in cases where a woman is only pregnant because she was raped or she was the victim of incest. J.D. Vance says even those women, in every instance, should be forced by the government to stay pregnant for the full term and should be forced by the government to give birth against their will. He supports what he calls a, quote, minimum national standard to restrict abortion everywhere in all 50 states, meaning effectively a national abortion ban. There's another part of Vance's record on abortion that's also now starting to get some attention, given his promotion to vice presidential running mate. Let's say you're a woman, you're an American woman who lives in Mississippi, and you need to get an abortion. The Republican-controlled government in your state, Mississippi, has, of course, banned abortion, so you're going to need to travel out of state in order to get one. Well, not so fast, not according to J.D. Vance. Now, this is not exactly a hypothetical. The Republican Attorney General in Mississippi has said that she believes Mississippi law enforcement has the power to effectively follow you out of the state if you find yourself in this circumstance. She believes Mississippi law enforcement has the power to get your medical records from any state in the country to see if you might have been able to get an abortion somewhere else, even in a state where it's legal. Mississippi law enforcement wants to be able to get your medical records from any state in the country so they can use those records in bringing criminal prosecutions for abortion. And it's not just Mississippi. Republican attorneys general in 19 different states all signed on to a letter to the Biden administration last year saying they would like the right to go after private medical records from anywhere in the country, including any state where abortion is legal. They want the right to follow women from their states all over the country to see if they might be getting an abortion somewhere or might be getting any other kind of reproductive care anywhere that they want to bring criminal charges about, so they can use those records for prosecutions. Turns out Senator J.D. Vance has endorsed that idea as well. The investigative news outlet The Lever was first to point out today that in addition to those 19 Republican attorneys general, J.D. Vance also pressured the Biden administration last year that they should withdraw the rule that protects women in this instance. They should withdraw the Biden administration rule that prevents law enforcement from tracking down and prosecuting women who have crossed state lines to have an abortion. Here is J.D. Vance's signature on the letter to the White House. If Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are elected in November, they will have the power to withdraw the Biden administration's privacy rule on this issue. They will have the power, without Congress doing anything, to make it legal for prosecutors to access the private medical records of women who have left their own state to obtain abortion care. So they can use your medical records to track you down and bring charges. Joining us now is Senator Cory Booker, Democrat of New Jersey. Senator Booker, thank you for joining us in what is an incredibly busy and sort of fraught news cycle. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks. Always good to be with you, Rachel.
I want to talk with you about the choice of your Senate colleague, J.D. Vance, to be Donald Trump's running mate. I want to ask you about something closer to home as well. Your nearest Senate colleague, geographically speaking, Robert Menendez, your fellow New Jersey senator, today was found guilty on 16 federal charges of corruption, including bribery. Today, you again called for him to resign. I just want to get your reaction to that verdict, and I'd like to hear from you what you expect to happen next here in the case of this senator.
Yeah, remember, Bob is a figure that most New Jerseyans know. He's been in the state working in public life for decades. And so for New Jersey, this is a painful day of real heartbreak and, frankly, just deep disappointment. A jury that was sworn to objectivity, a jury of his peers, found by the highest criminal standard beyond a reasonable doubt that he was guilty on all 16 charges. And so, yes, he must stand up now and leave the Senate. He must do that. And if he refuses to do that, many of us, and I will lead that effort to make sure that he's removed from the Senate.
Meaning that you would lead an effort to expel him from the Senate if he refuses to resign?
Absolutely. That is the right thing to do. It is the just thing to do.
Let me ask you about sort of broadening the lens on this same issue. It has been long expected that if a member of Congress or the member of the United States Senate is convicted, or in some cases arguably indicted, it has been argued that an indictment should trigger this as well, that member of Congress or that senator should resign or expect to be removed. We are seeing that play out right now with your fellow New Jersey senator, with Robert Menendez, with not only you as his home state fellow senator, but also Chuck Schumer, the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, also the Democratic governor of New Jersey, all insisting, Democrats loudly insisting that he must go, and there's no question about it, and it is no longer up to him. I cannot help but remark on the timing here, that this is happening on a day when the Republicans are in the middle of their nominating convention for somebody who has just been convicted on 34 felony counts. And they are not only not asking him to leave the ticket, they have promoted him to be the nominee of their party for the presidency for the third time running, and are projecting what appears to be 100% unanimity in that party behind him. Even his vanquished primary rivals, who were harsh critics of his at times, particularly Nikki Haley, saying that they are all in for him, with no mention of these felony charges at all. That contrast just strikes me today. And even in this painful moment for New Jersey, as you said, I imagine that it strikes you as well.
Yeah, it strikes me even more deeply than that. Donald Trump, too, with a jury that was sworn to objectivity, that convicted him beyond a reasonable doubt on 34 charges. That should alone be enough for anyone to be disqualified from the highest office in the land. There are a lot of honorable Republicans who have shown careers and patriotism from the military, from serving as senators and governors. To have a man that not only has 34 felony convictions, has pending federal charges, criminal charges against him, his business practices, he's paid hundreds of millions of dollars in fines for corrupt business practices. His charity was disbanded for corrupt practices and forced to pay millions of dollars in restitution. And the civil crimes are just adding up, including one for sexual assault. we are a nation that should do better than this. And Republican values, our American values, this belies not just common sense, but really the kind of moral leadership we need. And about the folks I'm watching tonight, from Nikki Haley to DeSantis, there are so many people that were on that stage tonight that he has not only been in deep disagreement with on policy issues, he has sought to humiliate them, to degrade and demean them on the most personal ways. It wasn't about policy differences when he viciously went after people in the most outrageous ways. And now they're running to that stage to endorse him. This is not what we need in America. We don't need someone that deals in demeaning and degrading people within their own party. And we definitely don't need a felon who's been convicted in federal court and someone who has paid out millions and millions of dollars in civil crimes, has shown in every area of his life, from his business life to his charitable efforts to even the criminal counts now against him, that he is somebody that is thoroughly corrupt in a way that has been proven in court after court after court.
Senator Booker, one of your colleagues in the U.S. Senate, J.D. Vance, has been chosen to be Donald Trump's running mate. Mr. Vance has not been in the Senate for very long. He was only sworn in for the first time last year. He's been there about a year and a half. He's only 39 years old. I wanted to ask your reaction to his selection. Obviously, a couple of things that are getting a lot of attention just in terms of the substance of him and his policies and his articulated positions include what I think could be construed as the most radical, hardline, pro-Russia, anti-Ukraine, anti-NATO position of all members of the United States Senate, I think arguably. Also a hardline, no exceptions, pro-national abortion ban position, which is something that is, I feel like has a different cast as the first national election that we'll be facing since the Dobbs decision, since the right to have an abortion was taken away by the U.S. Supreme Court. What's your reaction to his selection as Trump's running mate?
I mean, Rachel, you're jumping over the biggest, most obvious thing that I think people should be asking. They're trying to reelect Donald Trump. Well, where is Donald Trump's vice president? Where is Mike Pence? Mike Pence is not there, and neither is his former chief of staff, neither is his former secretary of defense. I could go through so many people that were part of the folks who worked most closely with the president, who not only are not at that convention, but do not think he should be president, have said so publicly. But the thing that most frightens me, and should a lot of Americans, is that Pence is not there because he saved our democracy, because he said that I'm going to move forward and certify an election that even Donald Trump's highest election officer said was a fair election. And so we now have a vacancy for Donald Trump to fill, and his first criteria is to make sure he picks somebody that, should we be in that position again, a lawful election in the United States of America, as was proven by court challenge after court challenge after court challenge, that noble Republican state actors like we saw in Georgia have to fight against the president's unjust efforts to interfere within the election. He picked somebody who has said publicly that if I was in the same space as Pence, I would not do the right thing. I would not do the honorable thing. I would subvert our democratic elections. And so, look, he's my colleague. I've sat with him. I met with him. I sincerely know how difficult it is to put yourself on the national stage. I wish him and his family the best. But number one, I know and worry about the outcome of this election, that he and others have said clearly they will not honor the outcome of this election unless, of course, Donald Trump wins. And then as far as a lot of his extreme views, in many ways, I'm grateful, because this lays plain for the American people that this is an election which is a clear choice about abortion and access to abortion care. It's a clear choice about Social Security, with his voice on what he wants to do to that. So many things. This is an extreme candidate that has clear views. It's a clear choice, and I hope America can see that now.
Senator Booker, it's Lawrence O'Donnell. Outside the Moynihan Courthouse today, when the verdict was returned, the U.S. attorney said that this finally puts an end to what he called the years of corruption by Senator Menendez. And in the sweep of that statement, it certainly sounded like he was referring to and including the first federal criminal prosecution of Senator Menendez, which ended in a hung jury. Do you regret immediately championing Bob Menendez upon getting that hung jury 7 years ago?
It was a hung jury. One juror would not render a not guilty verdict. Look, Lawrence, this is reprehensible behavior that he's been convicted of. These 16 counts involve not only honest theft of services, but doing things for foreign governments that should chill a lot of folks for what he's been convicted of. This is enough. He should step down. He needs to step down right now. And there are so many New Jerseyans who believed in him, millions who have voted for him, that this is a dark and painful day. He was convicted by this jury. That's what's, I think, hurting a lot of us right now. And the charges are extraordinarily painful.
Senator, just to follow up on it, as you know, the Senate Ethics Committee did find in that first criminal case against him, after they read the full court transcript and examined all the exhibits, the Senate Ethics Committee found that Senator Menendez 7 years ago violated Senate rules and related statutes, which means the committee found that he broke laws. Wasn't that the time to expel Senator Menendez?
The Senate Ethics Committee did not recommend expulsion. They wrote probably the most severe rebuke that I know of. And to me, that was a time that all of us should have thought twice. But then you know this. Senator Menendez was duly reelected by the people who had all of those facts. A multimillionaire used most of his election putting that forward. What's happened now, though, is to me the time where we all should be unified, Republicans and Democrats, simply saying enough is enough. He needs to step down.
Senator Cory Booker, thank you for joining us, sir. Appreciate it. We know this is sort of a news day of another magnitude than a typical day, sir. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
All right, let's go to the floor of the Republican National Convention, where NBC News correspondent Jacob Soboroff, as always, is making friends and winning people over to his winning charms. Jacob, what are you seeing?
Hi, Rachel. So we just heard from Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Ben Carson's coming up next. But if I could, I want to go back to Nikki Haley, as you've been talking about the news of the evening for just a little bit. Nikki Haley certainly, after being quite opposed, quite vocal, quite specifically against former President Donald Trump. I think she called him unhinged at one point. She showed up for him tonight. The South Carolina delegation, where I am tonight, has showed up. Come with me for 1 second. Has showed up for former President Donald Trump. And in fact, you know, I heard you guys talking about there was some booing originally when Nikki Haley came out onto the stage. There was not booing. You were telling me, hi, sorry to interrupt you. I met this nice lady earlier. You were saying there was no booing back here when Nikki Haley came onto the stage.
Absolutely no booing, 100%. We were yelling, Nikki, 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 and applauding.
Okay, so they were very happy. So if they were happy to see Nikki Haley, if Nikki Haley was happy to see President Trump, one thing I do want to point out is I don't know if it was returned back the other direction. If you look at where you were saying the seats are not great here, right?
Well, I'd like to be a little bit closer. So to say, it would be nice to be a little bit closer.
So check this out, Rachel, South Carolina delegation. We're in pretty much the last row.
Oh, yeah.
As far away as you could possibly be from the stage. Come with me. I want to give you take you for a little walk. We're here alongside the District of Columbia.
Alaska and D.C.
Oh. Yeah, Alaska. Here's Utah. No fans of Donald Trump back in the day. Here's Maryland. The Northern Mariana Islands are here as well. Hi, thank you very much for accommodating us. Really appreciate that. You can't even see former President Trump from the South Carolina section. If you take a look from here, you had to come up to the Northern Mariana Islands to get a good view of former President Trump. There he is, sitting next to Vice Presidential nominee J.D. Vance. And it was kind of strange, Rachel, actually, to watch former President Trump when Nikki Haley came out. You guys probably actually had a closer, long lens look at him than I did. But if there was excitement, you couldn't quite see it from up there in the box. It was contentious. I'm sure he's happy to have her here and have her endorsement. But there's a lot of strange bedfellows in this room tonight, and you can sort of feel it in this corner of the arena.
And corner is the operative word, Jacob. That really does seem like that's like beyond bad seats. I don't. Oh, does he want you to move? Is he mad? No, he's okay.
No, are you? I'm okay, right?
You're great.
Okay, I'm great, he said. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Okay, I love that guy.
I'm great.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, those do seem like terrible seats, Jacob. Thank you for sorting that out for us. I also want you to have better seats from where you are, which means you have to leave South Carolina and go to the Northern Marianas Islands in order to get it. Just seems weird.
We're on our way, Rachel. I'm on my way to Guam. See you later.
All right. Very good. Jacob Soboroff joining us. That's kind of amazing. I mean, the other thing,
Trump
I don't want
won the South Carolina primary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that is, I mean, they really stuffed them back there in the supply closet, man. I mean, maybe it's just coincidence, but I will say, I didn't want to ask Jacob this because I didn't want to make him answer this in front of all those people who he now has to spend the whole evening with. I don't want to put him in a weird spot. But it does also look like the whole place is kind of empty.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe tonight's the night.
Yeah, Tuesday nights. I feel like they really do fill up over the course of the week.
Yes.
Although the other weird thing is traditionally, right, the whole way it worked was like you don't see the bride before the wedding. Like the nominee doesn't come until the last night, and it sort of fills up and it builds up. Like Trump wants to be there all the time because he wants the center of attention on him. But also, like, one of the things about being the nominee is that you don't have to sit through a bunch of speeches. It's very funny to me to keep cutting to him because it's like not the most riveting thing in the world. He's given himself the job of just like sitting there and listening.
Did he look like he fell asleep the other day?
No, I mean, it was praying. It was praying. That was, I think, misinformation, not disinformation. I think people were mistaken. He did look sleepy because of the way he was slumped over, but it was the moment that the prayer was up.
But I'm sure
in the moment I noted it. I'm telling you, I saw it. Yes.
I do believe he relishes having Nikki Haley, whether he is not expressing it facially. Having Nikki Haley begin by saying, "I fully endorse Donald Trump." It's a moment he was going to not miss. It's more like an Indian wedding, having been to many Indian weddings in my experience, where the bride and groom are out for several days.
That's right.
Wedding,
yes, it's more like
rather than just at the end.
Lawrence, I wanted to ask you about what you were saying earlier at the top of the night, top of our coverage here, about what have been relatively low television ratings for these proceedings. You had suggested that maybe Trump's there a lot more than you would expect to see the nominee because he's trying to goose those ratings a little bit. He thinks being there himself might.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure whether he would have gone without the assassination attempt, I don't know. But I'm sure when he decided to go, one of the things in his mind was, well, this will certainly help Monday's ratings.
Oh.
That's actually bad news if it did, because it means if he didn't show up, they would have gotten less than 19 million people. And so these ratings are pretty low for a first night of a convention. We have last night's ratings. And this is the forum where you're supposed to try to reach out to some voters you don't already have, which previous Trump conventions have not been good at. And so this is people watching it here are people who are very interested in this. And it's entirely possible that of the people watching it here, they don't all intend to vote for Donald Trump. Maybe none of them intend to vote for Donald Trump. So remember, in the 19 million, there's a solid 5 million watching who are hoping this ticket fails, minimum of 5 million watching. So there's no more than 13 million people or so who are cheering for this ticket, who are actually watching this thing tonight. So this is, in terms of compared to past televised conventions, of the 1960s and 70s, this is a very, very small event.
I want to start with this new report. It just came out in the last hour from the Washington Post that President Biden is set to announce support for major Supreme Court changes. And I'm just going to say it struck me because last night one of the things that struck me about his interview with Lester Holt is that he went after Clarence Thomas, something Democrats have been doing, a lot of people have been doing. He has held back from doing. This is him endorsing things like an ethics code and term limits for justices. And it is something politically, I think a lot of Democrats care about, the base cares about. But what do you think?
Well, I mean, the court is a great issue for us. We've not lost an election since Dobbs in August of 2022. So I think it's good to put the court front and center. I mean, but the president's come out with packing the court and writ controls and a lot of things all at the same time. And I don't know if people are going to view this seriously. I think that, well, he's behind the polls, so he's come up with a lot of stuff. I don't know, but I do know that the court has been an awesome, tremendous issue for Democrats here in the last couple of years.
So, James, I don't know. I haven't heard you talk about everything over the last couple of days. I know you've been away for a couple of days. So has anything changed in terms of the Democrats you're talking to, your view on the future of this race? I mean, it feels a little bit like it's been suspended in air, in my view, the nomination. What is your take on it?
Yeah, there's great concern. I think it's going to manifest itself over the weekend. I mean, you've got people speaking out. I mean, now you had Adam Schiff. I mean, you've had a lot of people, and there's a lot of concern. And I don't know. The Democrats, we're having the worst summer any political party had since the Republicans back in the Nixon administration. So the people are worried. I'll be honest with you. There's deep and profound concern among Democrats in the Congress and everywhere else around the country. Everybody I see is asking me, are we going to be okay? This is just where we are right now, Jen. We can't, it's just it.
James, Ari Melber here. Always good to see you. How you doing?
Well, I'm in Alaska on a cruise ship, so I'm a little cold, but better off than being 100 degree weather.
We're touched you would join us from a cruise. So, you know, I had a question planned that we're going to get to, but you just said something pretty striking. You said that while there is an understandable pause or diversion away from what had been a heated conversation about the Democratic nominee, and I say the Democratic nominee because President Biden has the delegate votes. I've discussed that before. But it seems that you're saying that conversation might still yet reemerge before the DNC?
Oh, it's hidden, but yes, it's going to emerge again. I mean, people have already gone out there, and then you had Congressman Schiff today, who's our Senate candidate in California, and expressing the level of concern in the party, I have to tell you, is quite profound and it's quite deep. And, you know, we just went what we call a Mel of a Hess right now, and that's the best spin I can put on it.
All right, interesting. Because the conventional wisdom, such as it was, stated that it was a rough 2 weeks for President Biden. People discussed the debate, but he had stopped the bleeding of major public call-outs. He has, on paper, Obama and others having said, hey, keep going. And he has the delegate votes. Only he's the one who can change that. So just hearing your sort of... Go ahead.
Yeah, that's correct. But I mean, again, I'm looking at what people are publicly saying, and you know, and I also know what people are privately saying. And I think that, you know, once the Republican convention is behind us, and this horrific shooting is a little further in the distance, I think people are going to express their concerns about this, and I'm very concerned about the convention and the kind of lack of enthusiasm. Not to mention, the fundraising is really, really, I don't say it's dried up, but it's highly reduced everywhere.
Wow, really
and that's not going away.
Yep.
That's just not. You just can't wish that kind of stuff away. I mean, I hate to be the bearer of not great news, but it's every conversation that I have with political people or average people or anybody else. There's just great concern about where the Democratic position here is in July of election year.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, look, James, you don't have to apologize here. Healthy people prefer bad news over lies. Whether it's from a friend or a newsman or a newswoman or a doctor. So that we got you on that. Because you've been busy on the cruise, we put something together for you, James. And that's some of what you might have missed if you didn't watch every single hour of yesterday's convention. Because Jen raised this point, and Jen and I are anchoring here for the next 2 hours with folks. Jen made the point that we heard claims of unity, vows and plans of unity. Donald Trump has said his speech has been rewritten for unity, and we'll hear it. But also some of what the top Republicans were saying yesterday was not always unified vis-a-vis independents, Democrats, and the rest of the country. Take a listen.
Today's Democrat agenda, their policies, are a clear and present danger to America. They say they're pro-choice, but not if you want a choice over what your kids are taught.
The Democrats' economy is of, by, and for illegal aliens.
If you were looking for racism today, you'd find it in cities run by Democrats. President Donald J. Trump, the brave heart of our time.
James, what do you see there?
Well, I think Senator Johnson's, the teleprompter guy, made the mistake. It's actually what he said. All right, this is a part that talks about taking responsibility, and he said, well, I didn't mean to say that. They just put the wrong thing on the teleprompter. I don't know how to tell these people, but I said loudly and clearly, crime is down since Joe Biden has been president, and not down by a little bit, down by a lot more than a little bit. So, I mean, if we just stand back and let them have this ridiculous narrative of bad teleprompters or crime statistics that don't match anything that people are going through, then we're not going to do that well. But if we can get beyond the self-inflicted damage that we have and start putting this front and center, I think J.D. Vance is the most adaptable politician of my lifetime. I mean, look, y'all have done a good job of saying what he said before and what he's saying now. And as Jen pointed out, with the courts and the women's rights issues and these things, the gun issue, oh, my God. Why do you think that President Trump was shot? Because some loner that had access to a weapon. That wasn't anything to do with political rhetoric. So we have some stress, but we've got to dig ourselves out of this hole and start making a case. But right now, it's been a pretty dismal 3 weeks.
President Biden just did a speech where he talked about some of the things you've been mentioning, gun violence and other issues. I wanted to ask you about J.D. Vance, because historically, as you well know, as we all know, you've covered many of these, the vice presidential running mate doesn't massively change the course of a presidential election, but there's a lot to work with J.D. Vance. I mean, he has supported an abortion ban. He has essentially been a big proponent of everything in the Project 2025 plan. There's a long list here. What do you think the Democrats should be doing? I mean, how much should they be going after him? Should they be primarily focusing on Trump? What should they be doing in the next week or so?
Okay, so I just want to make an overall point. This is not necessarily a bad year for Democrats or incumbents. Every Democratic Senate incumbent is still leading. Mm-hmm. And they have to make the Republican candidates answer for J.D. Vance. They have to make them answer. I mean, we got to give some help here to the national ticket, and that's going to come from our Senate candidates in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Montana, Nevada, Arizona. I mean, there's fruitful lines of attack that exist here. And you're correct. The whole Supreme Court thing has been magical for us. We can't get off of that. But we have to make these Republican candidates answer for J.D. Vance and who knows, Donald Trump. Also, no one knows what his position on abortion is. I mean, it's impossible. But we got to push that. We got some advantages. I don't want to be overly pessimistic here, but we have to exploit the advantages that have been given to us. And
he was pretty pessimistic.
Right now, we're just unable to do that.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.